Hello everyone! Welcome back to the channel. In the previous episode, we followed a decision that, at first glance, seemed ordinary, so simple it could easily be overlooked. Yet for Hoài Ca, it was a turning point that could change her entire life. That decision was to begin learning how to read and write, a quiet, unspoken choice, filled with inner conflict, hesitation, and hope. For many years, because she could neither read nor write, Hoài Ca endured countless hardships that few people truly noticed. She could only take on physically demanding jobs, working harder than others while having far fewer chances to move forward. Pieces of paper and documents, things most people consider normal, became a source of fear for her. She couldn't read their contents on her own, didn't dare sign her name, didn't dare ask questions or speak up, afraid that her limitations would be exposed. Each time she faced such situations, Hoài Ca felt herself shrink a little more. She felt as though she were standing on the edge of life, watching opportunities quietly pass by without having the courage to reach out and grasp them. There were moments when she wondered if her life had become so narrow simply because she was illiterate, but in the end, she chose silence, having grown accustomed to that sense of resignation over many years. Hùng saw all of this. He didn't just notice the outward struggles, he deeply understood the growing sense of inferiority taking root in Hoài Ca's heart. He knew why she avoided conversations related to reading and writing, and why her eyes always flickered with anxiety whenever paperwork was mentioned. He never blamed her, nor did he press her with questions, because he knew such wounds could not be healed with hurried words. That was why Hùng chose to stay by Hoài Ca's side in his own gentle way. He didn't push her to change immediately, nor did he make her feel pressured or ashamed. Instead, he encouraged her little by little, patiently awakening a sense of belief within her that had perhaps been dormant for years. His words were soft yet persistent, like tiny seeds planted in the ground, waiting for the day they would sprout. Hùng told Hoài Ca that once she could read and write, the world before her would no longer feel so closed off. She would be able to understand things on her own, make her own decisions, and no longer live in fear or hesitation. He believed that with literacy, Hoài Ca would grow stronger, more confident, and finally be able to raise her own voice. He didn't stop there. Hùng also spoke about Tony. He said that one day, Hoài Ca could teach her child how to read and write with her own hands, walking alongside Tony step by step on the path to adulthood. She would no longer stand behind others, watching them help her child. She herself would become Tony's first and closest companion. Those words touched a very deep place in Hoài Ca's heart, where her worries about Tony's future had always quietly lived. Hoài Ca thought about this for a long time. There were nights when she lay awake until dawn, her mind filled with endless questions. She wanted to try, wanted to change, yet the fear of not keeping up, of not being capable enough, held her back. She was afraid of failing, afraid of facing that feeling of helplessness once again. But each time she watched Tony grow day by day, watched her child struggle through the long and painful journey of treatment, Hoài Ca could no longer allow herself to hesitate. She understood that if she remained afraid and stood still, she would never be able to become a strong pillar for her child. That realization pushed her to confront her own limitations. In the end, Hoài Ca made her decision. It wasn't loud, nor did she announce it to many people, but it carried immense meaning for her. During the time Tony would be in the city for treatment, Hoài Ca would enroll in an evening literacy class. She would begin her own journey, a slow but determined one, to gradually make up for all that she had missed. That decision made Hùng incredibly happy. He couldn't hide his joy whenever he looked at Hoài Ca. His eyes always shone with pride and trust. To him, The fact that Hoài Ca dared to face her fear was already a great victory. He told her he was truly proud that she had not surrendered to the limitations that had followed her for so many years, and that she had bravely taken the very first step on her path toward change. Beyond his sense of pride, a deep feeling of sorrow quietly welled up inside Hùng. He ached for the many years Hoài Ca had endured in silence, for the wounds she carried simply because she could not read or write, and for all the times she had been forced to swallow her words, even when her heart was full of thoughts and things left unsaid. He understood that behind Hoài Ca's calm acceptance lay a long life of patience and endurance, one that very few people truly understood. The next morning, the small kitchen looked just as it always had, filled with familiar scents and worn, old utensils. Hoài Ca was busy tidying up, her hands moving quickly as usual, yet there was a strange, unfamiliar feeling in her heart. Hùng walked in, carrying a carefully wrapped bag. He placed it on the table and gently called her over. When Hoài Ca opened the bag, she froze. Inside were brand new school supplies, notebooks still scented with fresh paper, neatly arranged pencils and pens, a straight ruler, and even a simple cloth bag to hold her books. Not only that, Hùng had also prepared a small writing board for her. He said that in the early days of practicing writing, her hand would tire easily and her letters would tremble, so having a board to practice at home would ease the pressure. Each small item left Hoài Ca speechless. She stood still, staring at them for a long moment, as if afraid that if she blinked, everything would disappear. During the time Tony was in the city for treatment, Hùng quietly took care of everything for Hoài Ca without ever drawing attention to himself or seeking credit. He spent time gathering information, asking friends, and contacting different adult literacy centers. At some places, he simply stopped by to ask questions. At others, he stayed for a long while, observing the class, listening to how the teachers taught, and watching the attitudes of the learners. He wanted to be sure that wherever Hoài Ca studied would be patient enough, warm enough, so she would not feel out of place. After many days of careful consideration, Hùng chose an evening class designed specifically for adults. It was a place for people who had missed out on education because of circumstances and the struggle to survive, and who were now starting again from zero. The class wasn't large, but the atmosphere was calm and steady, well suited for those who needed encouragement more than pressure. When Hùng handed Hoài Ca the registration form, she stood there for a long time. Her eyes lingered on the lines of text she still couldn't fully read on her own. Her hands trembled slightly, not from fear, but from emotion. In all her life, Hoài Ca had never imagined that one day she would go to school like everyone else. She had never dared to dream that someone would quietly prepare every step for her, every choice, so that she wouldn't have to face her fear alone. That afternoon, as she took Tony into the therapy room, Hoài Ca's heart beat faster than usual. She stood in the hallway, watching the door slowly close, a hard-to-describe sense of nervous anticipation rising inside her. This was the first time in her life she was beginning something entirely new for herself. Her emotions tangled together, worry that she wouldn't be able to keep up, awkwardness from never having sat in a classroom before, and mixed in with it all, a fragile yet unmistakable spark of hope. After leaving the hospital, Hoài Ca carried her school bag and walked slowly toward the evening class. At the classroom door, she paused for a few seconds and took a deep breath. Old memories of insecurity and fear when facing letters and words briefly surfaced in her mind, but she forced herself to push them aside. When Hoài Ca stepped into the classroom, the scene inside surprised her. The room was small, softly lit by warm yellow lights, with desks and chairs neatly arranged. Inside were people of all different ages. Some were young, still wearing their factory uniforms after work. Some were middle-aged, their faces marked by the passage of time as they carefully opened their notebooks and adjusted their pens. There were even elderly people with gray hair and slightly stooped backs, yet their eyes shone with focus and determination. Each person in that room carried their own story, their own past, but here, everyone was starting from the same place. No one was ahead of anyone else. No one was left behind. What eased Hoài Ca's heart the most was the look in the eyes of those around her. There was none of the curiosity or judgment she had feared. When she entered, some people offered warm smiles, others nodded gently in greeting, and some quietly made space for her to sit nearby. That simple warmth softened her heart, and the tension inside her slowly faded away. She sat down, placed her bag on the desk, and rested her hands neatly on the tabletop like a new student. In that moment, Hoài Ca felt clearly that she was standing at a very special point in her life, a place where she did not yet know what lay ahead, but for the first time, she no longer felt alone as she took her next step forward. The teacher stood at the front of the classroom, petite in stature, with a gentle, kind face. Her voice echoed through the small room, soft and unhurried, each word clear, as if she wanted to make sure everyone could hear and understand. Not knowing how to read or write is not your fault, but having the courage to start over, that is bravery. It was just a short sentence, yet to Hoài Ca, it felt like a direct touch to the deepest part of her heart. Her throat suddenly tightened. So many old memories were stirred at once. Times when people looked down on her because she couldn't read a single page, moments when she had pretended to understand just to hide her shortcomings, careless glances that cut sharply, and words spoken without intent that still pierced her deeply. For so many years, Hoài Ca had grown used to lowering her head, to blaming herself, to feeling inferior to others. But right now, standing in that small room and hearing those words from the teacher, she felt, perhaps for the first time, that she was not being judged. No one blamed her. No one dragged up her past as something shameful. Instead, her presence here was recognized as an act of courage. The surge of emotion made her eyes burn. She took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. In the past, she might have turned around and walked out, unable to bear having her vulnerability exposed. But this time, she stayed seated. Her hands tightened slightly on the desk, as if reminding herself that she was here, and that she would not leave. The first lessons were not easy for Hoài Ca. When she held the pen, it felt heavier than she had expected. Her hand trembled, her fingers stiff with tension. Each time the pen touched the blank page, she had to focus intensely to control every stroke. The letters appeared uneven, some too large, some too small, some drifting off the lines. Around her, many others had already finished writing. The sound of pages turning and pens being set down made her heart sink. She lowered her head even more, daring to look only at the page in front of her. Sometimes it took her a very long time just to finish one short line. Tiny beads of sweat formed on her forehead, her palms damp and cold. That familiar sense of inferiority crept back in silence. In that moment, Hoài Ca felt as if she had returned to her old self from years ago, small, lost, and slow. At times, she paused her pen, staring at her unfinished letters with a heavy heart. A thought flashed through her mind. Maybe this wasn't for her. Maybe she simply couldn't keep up. Her pen slowly lowered, hesitating, as if about to slip from her hand. Just then, the teacher came to her side. There was no reproach, no hurried glance. The teacher bent down to her eye level, her voice as gentle as it had been from the front of the class. She lightly held Hoài Ca's hand, guiding her through each stroke, where to begin, where to end. She spoke slowly, saying that writing slowly but correctly was better than writing fast and making mistakes, that everyone had their own pace, and there was no need to compare oneself to others. Those words weren't loud, but they were enough to calm Hoài Ca's heart. She nodded softly, picked up the pen again, and tried once more. Her hand still trembled. Her writing still wasn't beautiful, but this time, she no longer felt pressured. Beside her, the classmate sharing her desk leaned over and whispered a few words of encouragement. The voice was quiet but warm. They said that everyone here was starting over, that no one was good from the very first lesson. That simple remark made Hoài Ca lift her head and look around. Only then did she notice that the faces around her were filled with focus and effort. No mockery, no sense of competition. In that classroom, Hoài Ca gradually realized something different. Here, slowness was not seen as weakness. Clumsiness was not treated as shameful. Every shaky letter was a step forward, small but real. She bent over her notebook once more and continued writing. With each letter, her hand grew more tired, yet inside her heart was a strange feeling, part exhaustion, part nervous anticipation, and something else as well, a faint but growing sense of hope. Each evening, when the house slowly grew quiet, when Tony had fallen into a deep sleep after a long, exhausting day of therapy, Hoài Ca would quietly pull a small chair over to the table. The dim yellow light cast down onto the old tabletop, illuminating a notebook that grew thicker with each passing day. She opened it, carefully rested her hand on the page, took a slow, steady breath, and only then picked up her pen. Some nights, her hands ached, her shoulders were sore, and her head felt heavy from juggling both caregiving and learning to write, but she never allowed herself to stop halfway. Her early handwriting was still shaky, with smudged ink where her hand lacked steadiness. At times, drops of sweat blurred the page, but Hoài Ca would quietly wipe it away and continue writing. Every page bore the marks of effort, lines crossed out and rewritten, letters still uneven, but never left blank. To her, those messy pages were no longer something to be ashamed of. They were the clearest proof that she was truly moving forward, slowly, perhaps, but without stopping. As time passed, small changes began to appear. Hoài Ca's handwriting gradually became more stable. The letters no longer tilted as much, and the spacing between lines grew more even. She no longer felt lost when facing a blank page. Instead, there was focus, a growing familiarity with holding a pen, with the letters that had once filled her with fear. During some classes, when the teacher walked around checking students' work, she would pause a little longer beside Hoài Ca's desk. After looking at the lines of writing, the teacher would smile and gently say that Hoài Ca was making good progress, that if she kept this pace, she would continue to improve. To many, such words might have been just ordinary encouragement. But to Hoài Ca, they meant so much more. She carried that joy with her all evening, thinking about it long after she returned home. Once she was able to read simple sentences, Hoài Ca's life began to change in ways she had never imagined. She could now read documents related to Tony's therapy on her own, no longer needing others to read each page for her. She carefully took notes on important points and instructions, then searched for ways to better support her child in daily life. In the evenings, after finishing her own lessons, Hoài Ca would sit beside Tony. She began teaching him to recognize simple shapes and familiar letters. Her teaching was still clumsy at times, and she often had to pause and think for a long while, but she repeated everything patiently. Whenever Tony showed even the smallest positive response, a more focused gaze, a fleeting smile, a spark of light in his eyes, Hoài Ca felt her heart soften. In those moments, all the exhaustion seemed to fade away, leaving only a sense of hope slowly growing, little by little. Hung was far away, but he quietly observed all these small changes. Through each video call, he saw Hoài Ca sitting at her study table, books spread around her, the yellow light casting over a face clearly marked by fatigue, yet her eyes were full of determination. Sometimes, as she spoke with him, she would smile proudly after managing to write a difficult word, like a child showing off an achievement. Those images made Hung feel both deeply moved and more proud than ever. Hoài Ca understood clearly that the road ahead was still long. Learning to read and write could not be completed in a day or two, and the journey of walking alongside Tony would bring countless challenges. There would be moments of exhaustion, times of discouragement, and days when she felt she was moving far too slowly. But unlike before, this time she no longer felt alone. By her side was Tony, the greatest motivation pushing her to keep going. There was the classroom, a place where she could start over without judgment. There was the perseverance slowly taking shape within her. And there was Hung, the one who had quietly given her the chance to change her life through trust and unwavering support. Hoài Ca's journey of learning to read and write continues, day by day, letter by letter. And there, each character is no longer just knowledge. It carries hope, carries the future, and carries all the love she is striving to build for herself and for Tony.
Tạm biệt mọi người, hẹn gặp lại mọi người trong những video sau. Nhớ đón xem những video tiếp theo trên kênh mình nhé. Bye bye.